Well, I know you've been all over. My world travels
Yeah,
encompass India, Sri Lanka, Canada, and Argentina.
right.
And you must have done maybe 5 times more than that.
Well, or more than five. Total of 120 countries in the world.
So like 25 times more than that.
Well, it's probably getting on for about over a third, maybe moving towards a half of all the countries in the world.
Mm-hmm.
There are blocks where I've traveled hugely,
Mm-hmm.
and then there are other places which are where I've traveled by accident or by job, and there are places still that I would love to get to and probably will never get there because you have to, when you reach my age, which is 75, you get to the feeling that you can't go everywhere still.
Right.
You've got to be selective.
Yeah.
So my main travel, setting off from Europe, obviously living in Europe, early travel was very much in the countries fairly close to England, the Low Countries like Belgium and Netherlands,
Mm-hmm.
France, and then little by little going into Austria and Italy and Switzerland and venturing further and further afield. And by the 1960s, probably 62, 63, is when I first started interfacing with the Mediterranean, which is my great love. The other countries travel a lot in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So quite surprises me how much I have traveled in Africa, having crossed part of the desert by camel
Mm-hmm.
with the Tuareg, who are the blue men of Morocco,
Okay.
and worked in Tunisia,
Mm-hmm.
traveled all the way up Egypt as far as Lake Nasser.
So has it been architecture that's been your primary work in all these places?
Well, actually, yes and no. I qualified in architecture and basically applied art, which really means basically sort of graphics, because in those days everything was drawn, everything. So not only did you draw the building, but you drew all the lettering and you drew all these prescriptions, and everything was hand drawn.
Mm-hmm.
So part of the class of architecture included life drawing and modelling, which today is probably not in the typical architectural lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, one learned skills like model making,
Mm-hmm.
which is very important. And when I came to qualification, I was basically dropped off by my father in the middle of London with enough money to exist maybe for about a week. And he said, you know, from now on you're on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And how did I get a job? How can I get a job? And there was very little work in architecture. And this is, I'm talking about 1966.
Mm-hmm.
There was extremely little work as an architect.
In London or in general?
Well, in general, probably in England.
Okay.
Just going through a
But
kind
is it,
of
was it
a low
recession?
moment.
Recession, or was it just lack of
Yeah, there were
lack of space, or
constant recessions in England.
okay?
One of the reasons eventually why I left
Mm-hmm.
is that England could never really stabilize, could never get into a position whereby it was continuous growth.
Mm-hmm.
So even though you've had depressions here in America, they weren't as bad as they were in England.
Mm-hmm.
And so every time I got a company going, it was going for a couple of years, and then I got knocked back by a recession.
Mm-hmm.
So early on, I basically was fortunate of getting a job in the film industry.
Okay.
And as luck would have it, I worked on some award-making films,
Mm-hmm.
one of which won the Venetian Lion These were animated films, and two of the main designers of this particular firm, called Hallis and Batchelor, they basically suddenly left. They decided to form their own company, and I got rocketed to become head designer of the largest animation firm in Europe.
Okay.
Within a year and a half.
So you were what, like mid-20s or something?
Yeah, I was 25 or 26, something like that. And that was amazing because it put me in touch now with a lot more famous people around me, and that was important in resume building.
Yeah.
So I worked for about a year and a half on Lone Ranger and Tonto,
Which is
an animated series of American films starring the masked man. Remember the Lone Ranger?
okay.
And Tonto, his sidekick. And we made, I think altogether I made 60 films before I actually left the film industry.
Were you a drawer in those
Yeah.
films, or a creative thinker? Or?
Yeah, I was a creative interpreter.
Okay.
And my role initially was to read the script, to storyboard, which basically to image in a small way what would eventually be part of the film, the scenes of the film.
Yeah.
I also drew the backgrounds, and I planned the backgrounds. So effectively I planned the camera movements, and I planned the position for characters, and got very involved in that.